Welcome to the first episode of the Where Have You Been podcast. My name is Bill Ream, and each week I will have a new guest who will talk about their experiences traveling inside and outside of the country, and we will just learn from their stories what kind of travel they've done and just find out more about them and their family and their travel habits. My first guest today is a close friend of mine. His name is Brian, and we will learn more about his travels. And without further ado, let's listen in with my friend Brian. Today I have Brian Hasson. Brian's done quite a bit of traveling, and so Brian, why don't you tell us about yourself? Who are you?
Well, thanks for having me, Bill. Appreciate it. Yeah. Brian Hasson, live in Buffalo, New York. Pretty normal guy, do a bit of traveling. And part of that, my wife and I own a moving company. So we naturally, because we move people all over the place, I've done a bit of traveling with that. And it's an industry that can have its ups and downs for sure. But, we don't have much time to travel in the summer because we're busy, but, certainly in the winter and spring and fall, we can find some times to travel. So, which we love to do. And there's a lot of opportunities in our industry to do that. And then, my wife and I like to do fun stuff too. And we have 3 kids. My daughter's 13 and I have a 10-year-old son and a 7-year-old son.
On the topic of the moving company, how far have you gone actually doing moves?
As far south as, let's say, Naples, Miami, all the way through Texas, Arizona, San Diego, and then all the way up through Seattle and everywhere in between. So,
basically,
we actually, go ahead.
Basically coast to coast.
Literally. And that's not just our company has done moves there. I do have a Class A license. I've hopped on the truck and been in all of those places myself. So, yes, the lower 48, we've been everywhere. And I've actually hit every single state.
Nice.
Yeah.
Probably haven't necessarily been able to stop and enjoy every single state, or
not stop and enjoy when you're on the truck, but I've definitely spent money in every single state. And seen physically gotten out and spent money.
Yeah. So. Full disclosure, I know Brian. I've known Brian for a long time, and I know that this is a side note. This is not obviously what the pod is about, but I just want to mention, you can't say names, but you've moved some, somewhat high profile people, haven't you?
Yeah, we I don't know if I can not say names, but yeah, we've moved, we've moved a lot of Bills players, being out of Buffalo. We did something right somewhere along the way that we don't know what, but our name got in with the front office of the Bills, and, we tend to get a lot of referrals, directly from them. And then once you move one player, the wives kind of talk. And so we've done well with that. And, Tre'Davious White and, Deion Dawkins and just tons of Bills. Like I couldn't even, we've done some work for, like the CEO of, Gojo, the Ferrero Gojo people. And man, if I thought about it, there's so much, but yeah, a lot of different people we've been connected with.
Pretty cool. So on the note of the moving company, why don't you, since you have the platform to do so, at least tell everybody, what the name of the company is, if you'd like to do so, and tout yourself a little bit.
Sure. It's Wayfinder Moving Services. We're out of Buffalo, and, we've, just, one location at this point in time, and do as much as we can in and out of Buffalo.
Nice.
In and around and out of Buffalo, yeah.
People can find you on Facebook and on,
Wayfinder Moving. We're in all the places.
Okay, so you're into the moving business. You've been doing that for quite some time. Obviously, you said you travel for work. What do you enjoy? Do you enjoy the fact that you travel for work? And I know that you travel more than just like the actual physical moving of people. Like,
Yeah, so I will say um, I don't mind the driving and going out of state and the trips on the truck. Like, I enjoy it. I like traveling. I like driving different places. I've done it so many times in the same paths. It's kind of, I guess, a little bit more mundane, but I've taken a few trips that are, coast to coast, and, the trip from here to Arizona is a pretty cool looking one. And so, when I get to do that, that's enjoyable. I absolutely hate the moving part of that. Um, you know, After having 5 screws in my shoulder and a spinal fusion and some other things, I'm about done carrying furniture. Uh, but, so I've had those opportunities within the industry, but also our industry loves conferences in the winter in warm locations. So, for most of my time in the industry, I've gone to 3 or 4 conferences a year in California, Florida, Texas, just anywhere down south. And so those are a lot of fun. And I, I always loved that about the industry, that I got to travel and go to these places and meet up with friends from across the country, and it was fantastic. And this year I've taken the year off. The industry is a little bit slower, so less extra money to throw around. And so part of it's financial, part of it's, I'm realizing I'm losing some time with my kids. I only have so much time left with my daughter before she's out of the house. And I I'd almost just kind of rather take those times off. And our kids race for the soapbox derby, and we travel not all over the country, but all over the East Coast for those races. And I'm at the point now where I'd rather just trade that time in for those conferences with time with my kids. So
yeah, I hear that. So let's segue a little bit, I guess.
yeah,
So the main focus of the show is just let's talking about stories, and this is the part of the show where I say, "Where have you been?" But I also kind of want to start with, did you have a love of travel before you started in this industry?
yes. I think I've probably always had that. I don't know when it really cropped up in me necessarily, but I think my dad liked to travel, so I think the curiosity, the interest in new places, the seeing all the things has always been there. I think maybe where it really opened my eyes a little bit is a friend of mine, and I want to say it was in 10th grade, ran up to me in school and was like, "Hey, we're going to Germany next year." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And the school was taking a trip to Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. So spring break of my junior year, we raised money, did the things, and we went to Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And it was, I love all the old buildings, the architecture, the history in Europe. All those things were just so cool and super neat to see the things we did. And so I think from that point forward, it was always a dream of mine to go to Italy and see all the things in Italy, which I have not done, but is still on my bucket list.
Does that something you're like, being at that young of an age? What were you, probably 16? Like seeing the architecture of the buildings, like that's something that actually stood out to you even back then?
Yeah, I was a weird kid, man. I don't know. Some of those churches are so ornate and so cool looking, and just, we don't have buildings like that in the States. And if we do, they're few and far between, right? But you go to Europe and they have just absolutely beautiful architecture everywhere. And yes, at 17 years old, I was just awestruck by that and just thought it was the coolest thing and just really interested in it.
So between dad traveled and then you got that opportunity, was it like, I don't want to say game over, but like, I have to explore more of the world as I
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was like an adult moment where you say, "Oh yeah, I have to travel, explore more of the world," but I definitely left me curious. And I do remember if I go into my early 20s, right, like I know I wanted to travel to Europe super bad. I wanted to travel and see things. So I don't know if I ever had like a really like aha type moment, but definitely I'm sure that trip stirred that up in me and made me want to make sure I see everything.
Yeah. That trip in particular, any, besides just seeing the things, the buildings and the architecture and the cities and the towns and, any stories that stand out to you that were like, this was probably like the coolest thing I did?
I think there were some things that were striking to me. I don't, as a junior in high school on a school trip, being allowed to go to the Hofbrauhaus and have 2 beers, was, seemed pretty cool at the time. And now as an adult, yeah, whatever. But
No, I get that.
So
Yeah, that's cool.
I think there's the one thing so we're talking pre 9/11. So this would have been the, spring of 2000. Getting off the plane in Frankfurt, Germany, and seeing uniformed army or uniformed military guys with, assault rifles over their shoulder was shocking. I mean, it was scary. I remember being scared, like, oh my gosh, I don't want to step 1 foot out of line like these dudes have assault rifles. And it was just jarring to me. At that age, pre 9/11, like, and you just don't, even now, you just don't see that really in the United States.
Well,
so,
you don't see that in the U.S., but I will say I can relate to that to some degree, and it was not when I was a teenager. For my honeymoon in 2016 was in Rome. That was the first time that I remember seeing it. At every subway stop, at every like main place that we went to, yeah, there were armed, like you said, with assault rifles, and it's just like totally different mindset when you're walking through there. I mean, to me, honestly, at the age I was, I just felt safe.
Exactly, right? Like, so at 17, when I hadn't seen that before, I was like, oh crap, this is scary. If I walked into that same situation today, I'd be like, sweet, we're protected, we're in good shape.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing anything wrong. I know I'm not doing anything wrong. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't feel like I might get in trouble for something today, but I would feel safe.
Right.
Which is it's just a very different paradigm. Part of it's being older, part of it's maybe the world being a little bit different, but, yeah. So that was interesting. And I remember getting ticked off. We went to some, my buddy, we had some time on our own, so we could just go wherever we wanted. Once again, foreign country, 17-year-old kids, and they just let us go eat unattended anywhere we wanted in that city. Would never happen today.
Yeah, I was gonna
say. But they had rolls at the table. And so we both had a roll, and we couldn't order. It was hard because neither of us knew German, and it was like a local place. And, they come over to do the bill, and they're counting the bread.
Like, oh, God.
Because they're charging you for it. What? It was interesting. But.
And you couldn't just take out your phone and use Google Translate back then, so.
No. No, but it was, we did a lot of things. It was fun, but there was nothing that, I don't think there was any big major thing that was just really different, but it was certainly a wonderful cultural experience.
So you get a little older. When does travel continue for you in relation to real life? Like, you're married now with 3 kids. Were you doing traveling before you met your wife, or did it really start when you got?
I had a very short relationship before her, and so there was I went to the Dominican on a honeymoon, and really, maybe visited some friends in Florida, and that was about it. Like traveling, didn't, wanted to go do other things. But my wife, she loves to travel, did a lot of traveling. So we had been dating maybe a couple of months, and we drove out to see a friend of mine who was a wrangler in Montana, Big Sky, Montana. So we went out there, rode horses, went and saw a friend of hers in Salt Lake, and then, did Mount Rushmore and Yellowstone and stuff like that. And from, the trip was fantastic. And then, prior to kids, we did a lot of traveling around the States. And, honeymoon to St. Lucia. And my wife was actually born in Alaska. And shortly after we got married, her mom wanted to take us up there to see some friends that they used to know up there. And so we went up to Alaska, I don't know, maybe back in 2008, 2009, and saw a lot of things up there. It was very cool, very different experience. So, yeah, we did a lot there, and then probably had a little bit of a lull when the kids were super little. But over the last 5 or 6 years, we've ratcheted it back up.
I want to ask you my own curiosity, because it's on my list of places to go. What was the Dominican like for you?
Beautiful beaches, resorts that are beautiful, fairly inexpensive. I think it might have been a Sandals, so maybe not so inexpensive anymore. But all-inclusive resorts in the Caribbean are a thing, and it's probably not much different than any other one.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I think was eye-opening to me, it was a little bit humbling, is it was a 45-minute drive to the resort from the airport. The homes were, it was like a hurricane came through and knocked everybody's homes down, and they were all metal shacks and stuff. And it was like you just rebuilt your home off of what landed on your property. It seemed like, obviously that's not the case, but it was just these metal shacks that just seemed thrown together out of nothing. And like, we saw a couple of kids bathing in a cow trough. Like, it was just the poverty. It was the first time I'd really seen true poverty.
Yeah.
And that was an eye-opening experience for me. And people really did live like that.
Yeah. We experienced a little bit of that in Puerto Rico, actually, because we went in 2020, actually just before the pandemic hit, and they had, I think it was within 2 years of the major hurricanes that went through. And
those earthquakes, didn't they have, or something that really devastated it down there?
Yeah, I feel like they got hit with a couple of things back to back, and it was, when you're in San Juan, nothing's changed. It's beautiful. Everything's, perfect. But yeah, like you said, getting from the airport to talking to the driver and him telling us about the different areas and how, these places haven't even been touched yet. Nobody's coming to help. And it's terrible.
Yeah, it's definitely a different experience when you see some of those things for the first time.
Yeah. Of the places that you mentioned, like Salt Lake, Montana, Mount Rushmore, I feel like there's a lot that, now that I can consider myself to some degree a world traveler, mm-hmm. I forget how much beauty there is in our own country and how, in other places, each state of the United States would be considered like a small country. And they right. do have their own individuality and personality and, sights and such. And so I think I overlook a lot of things, and I'm trying to purposely not do that going forward. But like,
you have a wonderful experience not far from you, actually. Like, go whitewater rafting on the Gully River. That's an experience. Like, and that can't be, in Pittsburgh, right? So maybe a 5-hour drive, you can be whitewater rafting on the Gully River.
Where's that?
If that. So the Gully, where the, what's it called? The New River Gorge is in PA or West Virginia.
I know of it.
It's Route 19 that goes through West Virginia. So if people are traveling to Florida, mm-hmm. you're taking 79, then you do the cut over on Route 19 that goes through Somerville where they have the speed trap, mm-hmm. and then you connect to 77 South. So it's on that hour stretch of road. And they have the Gully River, and they let the dam out in the fall every year. So October is like prime time for class 4 and 5 rapids on the Gully River, and it's fantastic.
I'm a class 1 and 2.
Just such a wonderful.
No.
Class 1 is flat water, Bill.
That's
like so you want to be on the lazy river.
That's my speed.
In a tube with a beer.
That's my speed. beer or no beer, I think I've maybe touched a 3 once, and it was one of those like it's a 2, and here's a part that's a 3, and it was like okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't think I'll go on a whitewater rafting trip, that isn't at minimum 4s.
Oh, I'm
Um,
off.
because it's wild. The pictures are wild too. Like so I did some whitewater rafting in Colorado, was kind of like 2s and 3s maybe. And then when we went to Alaska, we went on 4s and 5s in Alaska, and that was fun, but way too cold, even in a dry suit. Like you're completely numb afterwards. But the Gully River, the water wasn't that cold. Water, the time of year, the temperature's not that cold, and fantastic. So sorry, that's not the travel we're necessarily talking about, but
No,
that's an experience for you that's not too far away.
well, or a tip and suggestion for our listener, if we have any listeners who can come to that area, make that a destination.
Yeah, it's
But
a good weekend thing, like a long weekend, or
so the ranching, like I said, Mount Rushmore, those types of places, like anything from those trips that just stood out to you as like this was not life changing per se, but just in awe of the beauty or anything like that.
yeah, I feel like most of those things where it's like, once again, I was 24 when we went to Mount Rushmore, maybe, and I realized it was like 30 minutes off our route, and I was like, okay, we're gonna drive, we're gonna go 30 minutes south, we're spending half hour, 45 minutes taking pictures of Mount Rushmore, and we're gone. And because every time I had seen Mount Rushmore, it was just the faces on the mountain. I figured you just drive by the road, there's a pull off, you take some pictures, and you leave, and we could have spent 2 days there. There was way more to do than that, and I think that we found that with many things. Yosemite, Yellowstone, a lot of those things, it's just, it's a lot more to do. Any of these places, they're tourist attractions, so they have other things that pop up that are interesting. And so there's always more to do than you think.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to change tactic a little bit instead of going chronological. Let's stay in the United States. You've been to many other big cities, many other places, whether it be for work or for leisure. What else stands out to you that was like, you know what, even if you live in the U.S. and you haven't been around the country, or if you're coming in from another country, everyone's going to New York City. They got to go there. They got to go to Los Angeles, right? They got to go to these big spots. But if you could suggest, like, where's the places that were just like, I want to go back.
Well, one thing that I want to get my kids to, and it's this postage stamp size place. But so when you say LA, most of LA I could care less to see. It doesn't really do it for me. But the La Brea tar pits in LA is this tiny postage stamp piece of property, and there's literally tar pits there with all the fossils in them, and they have all the fossils that they've dug out of them. You can see the tar pits, like really, really cool thing to see, especially when they're in the middle of excavating them. I'm like, I'm not a city party scene, like what's the city vibe kind of guy. If I go to New York City, I want to see the World Trade Center Museum. That's fantastic. I want to go up in the tower, and there's not a ton else that I'm really dying to do, but I want to go to Mammoth Cave, which we've been to. Like, I want to go up in the Arch in St. Louis, which we've done. I want to go to the Biltmore in Asheville, North Carolina, and see the Arch. Like, that's an old school castle in the United States, essentially.
It's a mansion. I was so impressed when you put that on your list, because I don't know anyone else who's been there besides me. And obviously, hundreds of thousands of people have been there. But
for sure. But just a time gone by, like, wealth that we'll never see, but you get an inside peek of 100, 150 years ago, whatever it was, how the wealthy spent their summers and what they did, and the 8,000 acre piece of property they have. Like, for me, those are the things I want to do. I want to go to see Red Rocks. I want to go to see the caves. I want to go to the national parks. I mean, San Francisco, I've from what I hear, has gone downhill quite a bit. But there's Alcatraz was cool, and there's cool things to see there. I just want to check off as many of those cool things as I can, and I have to say almost every single one of them has been worth the price of admission.
Yeah.
There's it's so hard to pick out one, you know what I mean? And they're all like these little things, like none of them are big, like trip you build a trip around, but it's like, just if you're going to be near there, we went up in the St. Louis Arch, and it was like we were on our way to Colorado to see our friends. We decided to go to, I think that's the same trip we did, the Biltmore, and then we're like, hey, we can swing and do Mammoth Cave. And then literally while we're driving, we're like, hey, we're going through St. Louis. You can go up in that arch. What are their hours? And it was like we were going to get there as they closed. So it was like, okay, 15 miles an hour over the speed limit, but for the next 7 hours. We got there before they closed. We got up in the arch, and it was great. So we just try to hit some of those things if we're traveling around,
Yeah. You have Chicago on your list as well. I've only been there for a weekend, and it was one of my favorite places. Did you happen to do the architecture boat tour?
I did not. I went there for my senior trip, so we did Wrigley Field, some of that stuff. Ate deep dish pizza. I've been there for some soapbox derby events. My favorite hot dog is a Chicago dog. But we haven't done a whole ton of in-depth stuff in Chicago.
Highly recommend if you get back there again to do that. It's pretty cool. I'm big into, especially if I'm in a place for a short amount of time. I'm good for as much intake of information and history as I can get. And there's so much going along those rivers.
Chicago's is just the history there is, it's got a very interesting and rocky history.
Yeah, it's a really cool story, and it's just the things you see are really awesome.
Yeah.
So, and you didn't, I don't believe, put on your list, but I know you've been there, and I know it was a work thing, New Orleans.
Yeah. I forgot about that, but yeah, I've been down there a couple of times for conferences, and Bourbon Street doesn't disappoint.
Yeah.
I agree. It smells like a cesspool, but once you get past that, it's pretty good.
Well,
live music, and I love to stand in the corner and listen to live music and not be bothered. And you got every bar live music. It's like Nashville, right?
And the buskers on the streets too are awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's a great, fun, a lot of energy there. Really, really cool place to visit.
And just for the record, I think I may have been there since you were, and maybe it was time of year, but the smell really, it wasn't there when I was there.
Wasn't bad.
No, not at all. Just a few years ago.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Yeah. Yes. If anyone's thinking about going, I say go.
Yeah.
Before we move out of the country, favorite food city in the U.S. that you've been to?
I'd really probably have to say maybe Chicago. And the thing is that you get my wife on here, and her memories of travel are tied to the food she ate while she was there. It could have been the coolest city, the coolest trip, but they had bad food and she wouldn't like it. Like all of her, it's about the food. So she would have a ton to say on that subject. And for me, I'd have to lean towards Chicago on that one.
It's the hot dogs, right? And the pizza.
The hot dogs, the pizza. Yeah, there's, they definitely have a handful of unique things there. And I do like that. So.
Yeah, I agree. The food in Chicago is very good.
Yeah.
I personally, not that anyone's asking me, I think above all things, to be honest with you, probably the Mexican food scene in San Antonio, Texas is probably my Yeah.
Yeah. And we lived in Austin for close to a year. There's a lot of good Mexican food down that way. So I can't argue with that assessment either.
Yeah. So leaving the country, besides the Dominican, obviously I'm sure that there's so much beauty and awesomeness in Alaska and Hawaii. But just, talk about your favorite places that you've been overseas.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of consider Hawaii overseas because it's such a long trip, but that's, my wife, like Jan and I, that's our favorite place is Hawaii. We've been to Oahu 3 times. We don't really, we prefer the North Shore, try to stay out of Honolulu and Waikiki Beach area as much as possible. But North Shore is fantastic. Just an endless amount of things to do that are cool and so much hiking and water activities and all that stuff. So we'd like to go there every year if we could probably afford to do it. And we actually, this last year in November, we took the kids there, and got to show them all our favorite things about Oahu. And so that was super cool to we redid a bunch of things that we liked and we knew. And, the Kualoa Ranch, where they filmed the Jurassic Park, the boys were just all about that. My daughter loves horseback riding, so she was all about that. We did a bunch of snorkeling trips and saw all the turtles, the dolphins, the whales, like all the fish. We saw all those things and just, the hiking, just everything. And they weren't necessarily sure they wanted to go, ironically, and they absolutely loved it. It was amazing. So,
and I've heard that
love Hawaii.
I've heard the people there are just wonderful and friendly and inviting. I mean, and
Yeah.
part of it, I'm sure, is just them as a culture and as people.
Yes, the life they live is pretty, it's about the land, it's about family.
Yeah.
And I think it might actually be a much more peaceful existence than we have. But either way, we went to the Polynesian Cultural Center, so we learned a lot about the Polynesian culture and just such a great people. I'd love to go see all the islands through all of Polynesia, but don't know if I'll be able to do all of that. But yes, the people are great, for sure.
Yeah, it's on my list.
So
I like a lot of people.
Yep.
And I've got a friend or two that actually live out there that I'd like to go visit someday, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
So,
but and then let's see. So a couple of years ago now, year and a half or 2 years ago, we went to South Africa. So I tried to get my wife to go to Italy, but our time frame where we could go, where we had my in-laws could watch the kids, it wasn't too busy at work. It was like April, and my wife's like, we're all in on Italy. We were going to go to Italy, and then she like looked up the weather there, and she was like, Brian, we have a problem. I'm like, what? And she was like, when I'm in Italy, I'm wearing shorts, t-shirt. I'm wearing sandals in Italy when I'm in Italy, and I'm eating gelato in the sun. It's 45 degrees in Italy in April. We're not going to Italy because when I'm there, I'm wearing sandals. So I was like, come on. So I almost got my Italy trip, but I was like, okay, where can we go that's overseas, that's warm? And so we started talking about doing a safari in Africa. And so we went, spent 3 days in Cape Town, did a lot there, the African penguins and Tabletop Mountain, some of the stuff down there, and that was really cool. And then we went up to, I forgot the name now that I'm talking to you, but we went up a little bit further north and did a safari for 3 days, and then we flew up into Zimbabwe, flew into Zambia to go to Zimbabwe, and went to Victoria Falls.
Wow.
Which is Niagara Falls on steroids.
I was going to say, worth the hype.
Yeah, it was high water season, so there's so much mist we didn't get to see much. It was cool, but it would have been nice if it was not such a high water season. We would have been able to see a lot more. But still, nonetheless, very cool. It was very cool in Zimbabwe, and there we got to kind of see some of the poverty that's in Africa, and Zimbabwe has like a 95% unemployment rate, which is just wild. South Africa is very poor, but they have like a 50% unemployment rate, and they're by far and away the wealthiest country in Africa. Mm-hmm. And it's like even even in Johannesburg, the capital city of South Africa, you know, they don't have any natural ways to generate energy for themselves. So they have to do a lot of it with diesel generators, but Paris Accord and all this other stuff, they can't get much diesel and they're not supposed to be running it. So they have these rolling blackouts, load shedding. And so they'll like multiple times a day be without power for 1 to 6 hours, where all of a sudden power grid goes down and you have no power. And I was like, oh, that sucks, you know, but it's like, you would think that emergency services, traffic lights, things like that would stay on. Nope. It all goes down. It's wild. So really, really interesting there. But the number one thing there, the number one takeaway is just how close you get to the animals and the volume. You know, you're just driving around in areas that look like they could be Western New York with the bushes and the fields and stuff. And you just come around a corner and there's a giraffe or there's an elephant or whatever it might be. You know, it's just standing there and they got it. You know, everything you see on National Geographic, it's all there. It's the volume of animals that are in these parks that you get to see, and so many times almost close enough to reach out and touch. It's just incredible.
Wow.
And I can't wait to do it with the kids someday.
And so how long were you in South Africa total?
I want to say it was like a 10-day trip. I think we had like 3 nights in Cape Town, 3 nights in doing the safari, and then I want to say 2 nights in Zimbabwe, and then 1 night in Johannesburg before we left, which we actually had hooked up with a company that we were thinking about hiring offshore labor to do some of our marketing for our company, and found out they had a place in South Africa and we had already planned the trip. And so we were able to connect with them and interview our our candidates while we were in South Africa. And so we did hire someone. She still works for us.
Wow, that's cool. And was that long enough? You know, the amount of time you spent at the place you were in there, and long enough to be in South Africa, I guess, too.
Yeah, definitely long enough to be in South Africa. Definitely long enough to do the things that we wanted to do. We didn't feel like we needed more time where we were at. Mm-hmm. Obviously there was more to do in Africa, than what we did. So sure, maybe you want some more time for that. But with the safari stuff, it was like you get up ridiculously early before the sunrise. Like you've eaten, I guess maybe you're not, they give you a snack, but you're in going out for half hour, 45 minutes before the sun comes up to do the safari because, you know, the animals are moving at sunrise and sunset. So you go do that, you come back, you have breakfast, you take a nap, you hang out, do whatever. Maybe it's a lunch, whatever, but then they do a dinner. And then after, I might be getting this mixed up, but you go out, you know, they're 4-hour safaris. So you go out for 4 hours in the morning and then you go for 4 hours out in the evening. And by the time you get back, you've been in the dark for half hour or so. So you do that for 3 days, you get 6 4-hour safari rides. By the time you get to your 6th one, you've seen almost everything. And maybe, you know, when people are coming and going as you're there. And so, you know, when we first get there, the people we were riding around with were just trying to check off the last few animals off their list, and everything was new to us. So we saw pretty much everything we wanted to see. I think the only thing we didn't see were African dogs. So it was plenty. And
if you can come up with something, what's the local meal that you would have that everybody has when they're in South Africa? And I'm sure it's probably different per area, but like what kind of meals were you having?
They have, you know, they have such different game than we have. So I'm going to say the name wrong. It's like a Zubu or a Zulu or something, but, it was different types of animals there. I'm trying to remember. Man, you're quizzing me on the food, and I'm terrible at the food.
I know.
I do. I do remember we went to.
Not that they don't have McDonald's, but you're not eating Big Macs. You're.
No, yeah, no, none, we didn't get any of that while we were there. But the first night we were in Cape Town when we flew in, everything closed so early, and we're so freaking hungry because it's, you know, it was a flight down to Atlanta, a 6-hour layover, and like a 12-hour flight over to South End, whatever it was. And the only place open was this fresh seafood place. Like you literally go up to the counter like you're at the meat market and pick the fresh fish that was caught that day because you're right on the ocean. And then you say, I want this and I want that much of that. And they prep it up, throw it in the pan. And it was just absolutely magnificent seafood. And, we go and do the bill, and it's like the way that meal was prepared, the fish that we ate for 2 people with drinks or whatever, you're talking $150, $200 for that meal. Mm-hmm. And it was like $28. It's just like crazy.
That's what I like to hear.
Yeah. But the most expensive part about Africa is the safaris and getting there. Everything else is dirt cheap.
Okay.
I mean, South Africa, the exchange rate's 19 to 1.
Wow.
Yeah. So very inexpensive when you're there. Expensive to get there. This safaris, for good reason, are expensive because they have to maintain their parks. So they're enclosed parks, but you're talking, 100,000 acre parks. Like they're just these mind-blowingly massive parks, but, they have to keep the poachers out.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So long story short, you already mentioned you plan to take the kids back there. It was worth it.
Would love to. Yeah. Yeah. As soon as we get a chance, and that it was obscenely expensive for the 2 of us to go. And then, you add 3 kids to the mix, and it's like not an option right now.
Right. Beginning, right.
I'm willing to bet a 10-day trip with the kids to do a similar trip. We're talking, it's going to be 30 to 40 grand.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if somebody could get you there for free, it'd be great.
Right.
Right off.
Yeah.
Hey, so we're kind of winding down. We're getting kind of close to the end. Do you want anything, because it's also a bucket list item for me, back in the stateside, Alaska, what you saw, what you did. It's good, right? I mean, it's unlike anywhere else.
Yeah, it is unlike anywhere else. I like the adventure, so the whitewater rafting was great. And that one was more of a family to see people trip and less of a tourist trip. So I think we went to Seward, Alaska, so that was neat. Kind of a lot like Seattle, the atmosphere from a nature standpoint. We did get to go walk on a couple of glaciers, which was super cool. So that's more of just a nature thing, being at peace with nature, seeing some glaciers, just experiencing the mountains and the wildlife. So cool things to do. Glad I did it. For me and the things I like, wouldn't necessarily need to do that one again. But that's just purely a personal preference thing, not because it's not spectacular.
Yeah. Okay. So again, kind of winding down, just a couple more questions I want to ask. Somebody starts talking to you about travel, just sitting down at a coffee table on the street somewhere, there's a couple crazy stories. Is there anything that happened to you in your experiences, anywhere that you went, that these are the stories that you have to tell because it was just so outrageous or so incredible, or, you know what I mean? Funny, crazy, near death, anything?
Nah, honestly, not really. We've had some pretty, nothing real too crazy. The only thing that pops into mind is they have these things called go cars. So they're they're a little bit bigger than go-karts, but they're these like three-wheeled mini cars, that are kind of like a go-kart, kind of like a car, that you can run around San Francisco in, or at least 10 years ago you could. And they kind of let you loose, and it's a self-guided, narrated, audio narrated tour of San Francisco, and you just run around in these things, and you're in there with all the other traffic, and it's some of my friends there who are less risk averse than I am felt like they had multiple near-death experiences, and Jan and I were just having probably a little too much fun with it. But that was interesting. But yeah, nothing real crazy or out of line.
Any place that you go, there's nothing wrong with that. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Any places that you went where you just happened to strike up conversation with just super cool people, not necessarily that you kept in touch with them or anything like that, but like you just had an experience, just having a conversation with someone that was like, wow, that was just a really cool, like, real experience.
Yeah, the one that definitively comes to mind for that is Jan and I went on our honeymoon to St. Lucia, which is also interesting. St. Lucia is a 7-mile wide, 14-mile long island, very small island. Once again, a 45-minute ride from the airport to our resort, because it's up and over the hills and winding turns and whatever. So we're in this little like van bus thing with 3 other couples. And so we all got married on the same day, all on our honeymoons, all similar ages. Half of us in that van were sick, from the motion sickness. We chatted maybe a little bit there, and then, we get to the resort and you figure you're probably never going to see them again. Then we bumped into the one couple for dinner, sat down, ate dinner with them. And then by the end of the night, we're partying with the other 3 couples. And multiple times throughout that week, the women laid on the beach and the men went and windsurfed and, did all the fun stuff. And it kind of kept us busy, and we all got along great. And I wish I had maintained those relationships. But you kind of get back to your real life and it doesn't happen. But it was just like, it was kind of like a friend's vacation where we were there with 3 other couples, but it was our honeymoon. So we got to go off and do our own stuff. But it was also fun to do stuff with other people. So that was really cool.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Do you make it a point when you're, obviously when you're off doing like your safaris and when you're doing adventures and things like that, it's kind of its own thing. But do you make it a point to try to strike up conversations with locals or other tourists, I guess, when you're in places, or do you kind of keep to yourself?
I'm one of those sticks in the mud, Bill. Like I struggle with that. Believe it or not, I'm more of an introvert. So, doing those things draws energy from me. And so if somebody's friendly with me, I'm absolutely friendly back, talk to them, but I'm very much not the initiator of those circumstances.
Cool. 3 questions left.
Yep.
So you already mentioned South Africa as a place that you, again, money notwithstanding, you want to go back to. Where else have you been that you're like, I feel like I definitely want to go back there again?
We always want to go back to Hawaii. I'd love to, go back to, I'd like to go everywhere in Europe, but which would include going back to Germany. And, yeah, of the places I've been, that's where I would be dying to go back to.
And for those 2 places, and Hawaii, especially because you've been there a number of times and you've gone to the same place more than once, when you think about that in your mind, are you going back to the exact same places, or are you exploring different areas that you haven't been to?
It's really interesting, right? Like you go to a place and you're like, that's our favorite place now. We know that's our favorite place that we've been so far. We want to go back there and experience that again. And to which is why we went back to the same place. Well, the second time we went back to Hawaii, we shifted from Honolulu to the North Shore, which is where we want to spend more time. And then we wanted to get the kids back there. We've told ourselves now, if we go back again, we will not go back to Oahu which is scary because if you spend the money and when you don't have the same experience, you're going to be disappointed. But we've heard enough and been told enough about, the other islands that we kind of want to check some other things out there. And since we like the North Shore, Maui is probably a really good fit for us. So we want to try that out.
Nice. Yeah. And that's a struggle for me. I'm interested about that because I've been to many, many places, and there's definitely more that I would like to see in many of the places I've been, but the world is so large that I struggle with going back to a place I've already been, even if I may have loved it, because I want to have as much experience as I can everywhere.
Yeah. Yep.
Where will you absolutely never go again? Is there that you're just done and not going back? Free trip, not going back.
Free trip?
Yeah.
Yeah. We went to Playa del Carmen in Mexico, which is about an hour or so south of Cancun. And it was like the resort seemed nice in pictures, but it wasn't as nice. And the beach had like all these concrete pylons in it, as like sea breaks, and the beach was rocky. It was terrible. We had a good time, but none of the water was heated there. It was January, and the water was gloomy and didn't look nice. And once again, we had a fine trip. It was fine. But then we go back to Cancun to fly out, and we're flying out, and you got the beautiful looking water and sandy beaches. And I was like, yeah, we definitely went to the wrong place. Like, I would never do that again. I would just go to Cancun. So,
okay.
But yeah.
And, all right. And then final question is not just, I don't want to just say bucket list, because I don't want it to be in the realm of, okay, well, someday I can afford to do this. We can go there. And I want to put it in this context because there's websites out there that I have no affiliation with, but there's places where, I get emails every so often completely legitimately that there's a mistake fare or there's an airline that's trying to fill a flight and you could get round trip to Japan for $800, which is incredibly cheap. Or, Ireland for $400 or $500. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's insane. So you get a smoking deal on a place. Where are your, and I know Italy's part of it. That's probably your number one. And that can be your number one, but is there another place that you're like, I really want to get there before I die?
It's literally anywhere in Bali, Polynesia somewhere, Thailand, Japan, just any of those places we would just love to go to, which I'd love to go to any of them. And I'll say this, because one of your questions might have been like, where are you going next? And we this year decided as a family that we're not going to make Christmas as big as we've tried to make it. And I'm sure you experienced this with your kids when you're little. It's like, man, we've got 3 kids. And so you start buying them the stuff they need, and then you look down, you put it all out, and you're like, crap, this one's got more than that one. And so then you're going to the store and you're just buying more stuff just to make it look like they have as much stuff. And it's like, man, we don't need all this crap. So we're going to really bring Christmas down to a very small thing. But what we're having our kids do, and this was my wife's idea, was, there'll be a couple of things at Christmas that'll happen. One, we'll give them the budget for our trip next year, our family trip the following year, and then we will reveal where we're going this year. And then our kids have to pick a place in the world that we're going to go, figure out how much it's going to cost to get there and how much it would cost to have the trip within reason and age-based. Like my 7-year-old is going to be a very limited. He'll get a lot of help. Mm-hmm. My 13-year-old daughter will get a lot less help. But all 5 of us have to present our trip to the family for where we think we want to go based on the budget we've been given for that year. And the kids have to do all the research and the budgeting, once again, within reason, to figure that out. And then, kind of decide as a family where we're going to go. So we've done that. We've set the budget. In another few weeks here, everybody's going to present their trip, which could range from Bali to Europe to somewhere in the States, and we'll just have to see what we can make work. But every year we're going to do that, and the better we get about budgeting and setting money aside, the bigger and grander the trips can be. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. We definitely made a concerted effort as our kids got older, and like you said,
Yeah,
100% that we went through that year after year after year. We've still gone through that even in recent years, and my kids are 19 to 23 years old. But made it a concerted effort to do less and less material things and more memories, creating memories.
yeah, and the data shows like kids almost, once you become an adult, you can't tell what you got for Christmas unless it's like one thing in one particular year. But for the most part, kids have no idea what they got for Christmas 6 months after they got it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as they grow up, they have very vivid memories of their family trips, and it doesn't have to be South Africa, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could be an hour down the road to do something fun or special if that's what your budget is, right? So, but I think that family bonding is, for us, we've decided it's super important. We travel a lot with the Soapbox Derby together. That's been hugely beneficial. And, my wife and I have decided, hey, if we put this budget together, we've got a high yield savings account, online savings account. And we just say, okay, here's the budget, split that out over 52 weeks. It's a little bit harder to get to, but then the money will be there when we go to plan the trip. So That's been helpful. It's a lot easier when there's some intention there, and it's like, okay, we know we can pull this much out of our paycheck every week without being hurt. And maybe it might be uncomfortable, but it's okay because we get a trip out of it at the end. But once that money's socked away somewhere else where it's hard to get to, it makes it really hard to come up with excuses why you need that money. So it makes it a lot easier to save for a vacation.
Yeah. I think it's a great idea. And I think it's something that now, giving it more thought, that's something that could even continue when your kids are older and even adults. You can still be planning these family trips together. The budget may be a little bit bigger because there may be more people, but there are people contributing too, probably. So,
and that's the hope. How do you build your relationship with your kids in such a way that they want to come hang out with you when they're adults?
Yeah.
And that's important to them, And then the other thing that this is kind of like a bonus once in a lifetime thing for us because of the industry we're in. We decided that the summer, August of 2026, which is going to be really crazy hard for us, but all those places that we talked about all throughout the United States that are really cool to see and you want to check off your bucket list, we're going to rent an RV for 3 weeks in August, and we're going to do a U.S. road trip and check off as many of those places that we talked about earlier as humanly possible.
Nice.
Yeah. Oh. And so.
Awesome. Well, and you brought up, thank you for reminding me, where are you going? It's a big year. There's a lot of time left. We're early in the year. Do you have anything planned for this year for sure coming up?
We will probably end up in Orlando area for Thanksgiving. We've done that trip. We didn't do it last year, but we did it for the 3 years prior. Do 1 or 2 days at Disney, spend a week or so down there. It's an easy time of year to travel because you don't miss that many days of work, but of course everybody's traveling, so it can be miserable. But the Airbnbs they have down there are just the most incredible houses you could ever get for a young kid. But my mother and father-in-law live down there. My mom lives down there. And so our friends go down, and we could just kind of do Thanksgiving down there. So we will, I believe that's the plan this year, is to head down there for maybe a week, around Thanksgiving.
I seem to recall some years back, you and I were both there and didn't even realize it until we were a couple of people that just gotten there.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. Find your friends.
Yep.
Well, awesome, man. Anything that you want to add? Anything that we missed?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think we covered a whole bunch of stuff there. So be interested to see who else you get on here and where they've been, because like I said, we want to keep traveling the world as much as possible. So
Yeah, I think my one, as if this becomes the first episode, the one thing to say is, if you have it in your mind that you want to do it, and even if you're thinking, I don't have a way to, I just can't. There's a way. Like, just find a way. And whether it's a high yield
yeah,
savings account that you're socking money away, and maybe it's not for a year and a half that you actually get to do it. When you actually get to do it, it's so worth it and rewarding.
yeah,
And even, I think, like you were kind of alluding to with, the kids and their memories, it doesn't have to be across the country or across the world. You can take an hour trip somewhere, or even just go camping.
yeah,
It's not, maybe it's not what you would consider true traveling, but you can find small towns with stories and people and cool, interesting things everywhere. So
yeah,
I would just say,
yeah,
if you have any thought of doing it, and if you've never done it, just do it. Just do it.
yeah. I agree. Absolutely.
Well, thanks for your time, Brian Hasson. Appreciate having you.
Yes, sir.
And we will definitely catch up again, because I'm interested to see where the family chooses to go.
Yes. Me too.
And there you have it. Episode 1 is in the books. If you liked what you heard, I hope that you will subscribe to the podcast, as I will be having many more interesting guests week after week. And we will find out about where they have traveled, where they would like to go, and hopefully it spurs something in you to decide that maybe you would like to go to some of those places. And maybe even it brings back memories of times that you've gone to the places that we've talked about. So please join us again as we continue forward with the Where Have You Been podcast. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.